The morning sun peeked through the clouds as Miguel stood in front of Westlake Music Academy, clutching his worn guitar case. The massive building with its brick walls and grand entrance made his stomach twist into knots. Kids with expensive instrument cases and pressed uniforms brushed past him, barely noticing the boy in faded jeans and his older brother's hand-me-down jacket. "You got this," Miguel whispered to himself, running his fingers over the small scratch on his guitar case. A battle scar from years of love. At 14, Miguel wasn't like the other kids auditioning today. He didn't have years of private lessons or parents who were music professors. What he had was passion, countless hours of teaching himself by watching free online videos, and the melodies that seemed to flow from his heart straight to his fingertips. 3 buses and a 30-minute walk had brought him here. The Academy's Youth Orchestra Scholarship Program was his one shot at real music education. Without it, his dream would remain just that, a dream floating just out of reach. Miguel took a deep breath and pushed through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the hallway gleamed with polished floors that reflected the trophy cases lining the walls. Photos of past orchestra performances and famous alumni stared down at him. Their eyes seemed to ask, "Who are you to be here?" A girl with a violin walked past, playing scales so perfect they sounded like they came straight from a recording. A boy sat on a bench, his fingers dancing over a flute, producing notes that floated like butterflies. Miguel's confidence began to shrink with each step he took. "You must be here for the auditions," said a thin man with silver-rimmed glasses, looking up from a clipboard. "Name?" "Miguel Reyes," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. The man ran his finger down a list. Don't see you here. Did you pre-register through your music instructor?" Miguel shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I don't have an instructor. I called last week and spoke to someone who said I could still try out." The man raised an eyebrow but made a note on his clipboard. "Room 103. Director Harrington is running behind schedule, so you might be waiting a while." Miguel nodded his thanks and found a spot on a bench in the hallway. Around him, parents fussed over their children, straightening bow ties and giving last-minute advice. He pulled out his phone and reread the text from his mom. "Buena suerte, mijo. No matter what happens, we are so proud." The message brought a small smile to his face. A boy with perfectly combed hair and a shiny trumpet case sat down beside him. "What piece are you playing?" he asked, his voice friendly but confident. Miguel hesitated. "It's something I wrote myself." The boy's eyebrows shot up. "You wrote your own audition piece? Bold move." "I'm doing Mozart's Trumpet Concerto in E-flat major. Been working on it for 7 months with my private coach." Before Miguel could respond, the boy was called in. "Good luck," Miguel offered. The boy grinned and replied, "Don't need it, but thanks." The minutes ticked by slowly. Miguel watched as students entered room 103 with nervous faces and exited with either tears or triumphant smiles. He used the time to mentally go through his piece again, his fingers silently moving as if playing invisible strings. From inside his case, he pulled out his guitar, a second-hand classical model his parents had bought from a pawn shop 3 years ago for his birthday. It wasn't fancy, but Miguel had learned every inch of it. How it responded to the lightest touch, how the third string needed extra care when tuning. He quietly strummed a few chords, adjusting until each note rang true. An older man in a janitor's uniform was mopping nearby, and Miguel noticed him pause and listen. Their eyes met, and the man gave him a small nod of approval before continuing his work. Finally, the door to room 103 opened, and a stern-looking woman appeared. "Next," she called, not bothering to look up from her notes. Miguel stood, his legs suddenly feeling like they were made of jelly. He followed Director Harrington into the room, which had a baby grand piano in one corner and chairs arranged for what must be the orchestra practice. The walls were lined with soundproofing panels and large windows let in natural light. "Place your case there." Director Harrington pointed to a table without looking at him. She was a tall woman with her hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her crisp blazer and pencil skirt screamed authority, and the pearl necklace at her throat caught the light as she moved. "Your name and instrument?" she asked, finally looking up. "Miguel Reyes, guitar." She frowned slightly. "Guitar isn't typically a primary orchestra instrument, but we do have a few spots for skilled players." "What piece have you prepared today?" Miguel swallowed hard. "It's an original composition. It combines classical structure with some rhythms from my family's homeland." For the first time, Director Harrington seemed to actually look at him, taking in his worn jeans, The guitar that had seen better days and his nervous stance. Something in her expression shifted, and not in a good way. An original composition, she repeated, her tone making it clear what she thought of that idea. Very well. Proceed. Miguel positioned his guitar and closed his eyes for a moment, finding his center. Then he began to play. The piece started softly, with delicate finger-picking that built into a melody that spoke of homesickness and hope. He'd worked on this for months, pouring everything he felt about his family's journey and his dreams into the music. As he played, he added percussive elements by tapping the body of the guitar, incorporating rhythms his grandfather had taught him. He was lost in the music, his heart racing with the joy of sharing his creation when he heard it, a small, dismissive laugh. Miguel's eyes snapped open to see Director Harrington shaking her head, a smile that wasn't kind playing at her lips. That's enough, she said. Holding up her hand, Miguel stopped mid-note, the sound dying abruptly in the room. You call that music? Director Harrington asked, her voice dripping with condescension. What you're doing is interesting, I suppose, but it's not what we're looking for here at Westlake. Miguel felt heat rise to his cheeks. I can play something else if you'd prefer. I don't think that will be necessary, she replied, already writing something on her evaluation sheet. This is a prestigious program, young man. We focus on proper classical technique and established repertoire. What you're doing is frankly undisciplined and lacks proper training. Each word hit Miguel like a physical blow. He looked down at his guitar, suddenly seeing all its flaws. The slight discoloration on the body, the worn frets, the bridge he'd had to fix himself after it came loose. Our students typically have years of formal training before they even audition, Director Harrington continued, not looking up as she wrote. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, this academy is not the place for beginners or experimental styles. Miguel stood frozen, unsure what to say. The confidence that had carried him through 3 bus rides evaporated. You need to learn proper technique, theory, and repertoire before attempting something like this, she added, finally looking up. Perhaps in a few years after some actual training, you might be ready to audition again. Miguel carefully placed his guitar back in its case, his movements mechanical. His fingers, which had moved so freely over the strings moments ago, now felt stiff and clumsy. Thank you for the opportunity, he managed to say, his throat tight with unshed tears. Director Harrington was already looking at the list of remaining auditions. Close the door on your way out, she said dismissively. The hallway seemed longer as Miguel walked out, head down to hide the moisture in his eyes. He could hear another student playing violin from behind a practice room door. Perfect, precise notes that seemed to mock his own playing. Outside room 103, parents and students turned to look at him, quickly assessing from his expression how the audition had gone. Miguel kept walking, not wanting anyone to see him break down. Helpless boy, he heard someone whisper as he passed. Didn't even bring sheet music. Miguel pushed through the academy's front doors, gulping in the fresh air. The bright day now seemed to mock his dark mood. He'd been so sure that his passion would be enough, that someone would hear what he heard in his music. He sat on the stone steps, unable to face the journey home yet, unable to tell his parents that their encouragement and belief in him had been misplaced. His phone buzzed with a text, his mom asking how it went. Miguel stared at the screen, unsure how to answer. Behind him, the door opened, and he quickly wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Miguel sat on the stone steps of Westlake Music Academy, guitar case clutched to his chest like a shield. The laughter of the director still rang in his ears. You call that music? The words had cut deeper than any knife could. He couldn't bring himself to text his mom back. What would he say? That he'd failed before he even had a chance? That the music that flowed from his heart was nothing but noise to trained ears? The door behind him opened, and Miguel quickly wiped his eyes, not wanting anyone to see him crying. He expected another student, or maybe a parent, but instead the same older man he'd noticed mopping the hallway earlier stepped out. Mind if I join you? The man asked, gesturing to the empty space on the step. Miguel shrugged, trying to look like he didn't care either way. The janitor sat down with a small grunt, his knees cracking slightly. He was probably in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and hands that looked like they'd seen hard work. He wore a simple gray uniform with Westlake maintenance stitched over the pocket. Tough crowd in there, the man said, nodding toward the building. Yeah, Miguel replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a moment, watching cars pass on the street. The man pulled out a small paper bag and opened it, taking out a sandwich. He broke it in half and offered a piece to Miguel. "Not hungry," Miguel said, but his stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. The janitor chuckled and continued holding out the sandwich. "Name's Mr. Chen. Been working here 15 years. Miguel reluctantly took the sandwich half. "Thanks, I'm Miguel." "I know," Mr. Chen said, taking a bite of his own sandwich. "I heard you play." Miguel stiffened. "You heard that disaster?" "What disaster?" "I heard music." Mr. Chen's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Real music." Miguel stared at him, trying to decide if the man was making fun of him too. But there was nothing but sincerity in Mr. Chen's weathered face. "Director Harrington didn't think so," Miguel mumbled, picking at the sandwich. "Ah, well, Cynthia Harrington hears with different ears." Mr. Chen looked out at the street. "She hears technique, rules, structure. She's trained to spot mistakes, not feel soul." "But she's the director," Miguel pointed out. "She must know what she's talking about." Mr. Chen nodded slowly. "She knows classical music theory better than almost anyone." "But music isn't just theory, is it?" For the first time since the audition, Miguel felt something other than shame. He took a bite of the sandwich, peanut butter and honey, simple but good. "What was that rhythm you were using?" Mr. Chen asked suddenly. "In the middle part of your piece?" Miguel blinked, surprised by the question. "It's something my grandfather taught me. He played in bands back in Guatemala before coming here. It's a pattern used in marimba music." "Thought so," Mr. Chen nodded. "Had a nice groove to it. Reminded me of some stuff I played back in the day." "You play?" Miguel asked, his interest piqued. Mr. Chen smiled mysteriously. "Bit of this, bit of that. Was a session musician for almost 20 years before I hurt my wrist." He held up his left hand, showing a slight bend that hadn't been noticeable before. "Couldn't play like I used to, so I found other work. Turns out schools always need someone to fix things." Miguel's eyes widened. "Session musician? Like recording with real bands?" "Yup, never got famous, but I played on some tracks you've probably heard." Mr. Chen's eyes twinkled. "Worked with some big names in the 80s and 90s. "That's so cool," Miguel said, his own problems momentarily forgotten. "So what's your plan now?" Mr. Chen asked, finishing his sandwich. The reminder of his failure brought Miguel crashing back to reality. He slumped again. "Go home, I guess. Tell my parents I wasn't good enough." "Is that what happened in there? You weren't good enough, or you just didn't fit what they were looking for?" Miguel frowned, thinking about the question. "She said I lacked proper training." "Training can be learned," Mr. Chen said simply. "Soul can't be taught." A student walked past them, carrying a cello case that probably cost more than all of Miguel's family's possessions combined. The boy didn't even glance their way. "What I heard in there," Mr. Chen continued, lowering his voice, "this was raw talent. Untrained, sure. Rough around the edges, definitely. But real. Genuine." Miguel felt a tiny spark of hope flicker in his chest. "Really? Really?" Mr. Chen stood up, brushing crumbs from his uniform. "You know, I've got keys to the practice rooms. They're not used after hours." Miguel stared at him, not understanding. "I'm saying," Mr. Chen clarified, "that if someone wanted lessons and someone else had time to teach, there might be an empty room available around 6 p.m. most evenings." The spark in Miguel's chest grew brighter. "Are you offering to teach me?" Mr. Chen shrugged. "I'm just saying possibilities exist. For a kid with real talent." "But why would you help me?" Miguel asked, suspicious of sudden kindness after such a harsh rejection. Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. "Because 30 years ago I was told I didn't have the right background to make it in music. That I should stick to what my kind was good at." His expression grew distant. "I had to learn the hard way on my own. Could have gone further if someone had shown me the shortcuts." Miguel stood up, clutching his guitar case. "I don't have money for lessons." "Did I mention money?" Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "No, but sometimes passing on what you know is payment enough." Mr. Chen checked his watch. "I've got to finish my rounds. But if someone happened to come by the east entrance around 6 tonight, I might be taking my break then." He turned to go back inside, then paused. "Oh, and bring that guitar. It's got a nice tone, even if it needs new strings." As the door closed behind Mr. Chen, Miguel stood frozen on the steps. Was this real? Or was the janitor just being nice to a kid who'd embarrassed himself? The afternoon sun was warm on his face as Miguel finally pulled out his phone. Instead of texting his disappointment to his mother, he typed, "Audition didn't go as planned, but something interesting happened. Will tell you when I get home. Might need to come back tonight." The bus ride home was different this time. Instead of dreaming about joining the orchestra, Miguel found himself wondering about Mr. Chen. What instruments did he play? What famous songs had he worked on? Could he really teach Miguel what he needed to know? Miguel's neighborhood was a stark contrast to the manicured grounds of Westlake Academy. Here, apartment buildings crowded together, laundry hanging from balconies and music of various styles spilled from open windows. It was alive in a different way, messier but more vibrant. His family's apartment was on the third floor of a worn but clean building. Miguel took the stairs two at a time, his earlier defeat now mixed with a strange new energy. "Mijo, how did it go?" His mother called the moment he opened the door. She was still wearing her housekeeping uniform from the hotel where she worked. Her hopeful smile made Miguel's heart twist. His younger sister Lucia looked up from her homework at the small kitchen table, equally eager to hear about his triumph. "I didn't get in," Miguel said, setting down his guitar case. His mother's face fell, but she quickly covered it with a brave smile. "It's okay. It was a very fancy school. Maybe next time." "The director said my playing wasn't real music," Miguel continued, the words still stinging as he spoke them. She laughed. His mother's expression hardened. No one laughed at her children. "She doesn't understand your gift then." "That's what the janitor said too," Miguel replied, a small smile breaking through. "The janitor?" his sister asked, confused. Miguel explained about Mr. Chen, how he'd been a musician, how he'd offered to teach Miguel, how he'd said Miguel had real talent. "He's probably just being nice," his father said, entering from the bedroom where he'd been resting before his night shift at the factory. "Why would a school janitor know about music?" "He said he was a session musician," Miguel insisted. "And he knew about the Guatemalan rhythms I used." His parents exchanged looks, the kind adults share when they're worried about a child's disappointment. "He wants me to come back tonight for a lesson," Miguel continued. "At 6, tonight?" His mother frowned. "I don't know, Miguel." "We don't know this man. Please, Mama, what if he really can help me? What if this is my chance?" His father sighed. "Miguel, sometimes people make promises they don't keep. I don't want you getting hurt again today." Miguel felt desperation rising in his chest. "Just this once. If he doesn't show up or if it's weird, I'll never go back. I promise." His parents had another silent conversation with their eyes. Finally, his father nodded. "I'll take you. I start work at 8, so I have time, but I want to meet this Mr. Chen first." Relief washed over Miguel. "Thanks, Papa." As Miguel helped his sister with her math homework, his mind kept drifting to what might happen that evening. Would Mr. Chen really be there? Could he actually learn what he needed to impress Director Harrington? At 5:30, Miguel and his father set out for Westlake Academy again. Miguel had changed his strings using the last set he'd been saving for an emergency. This felt like one. The school looked different in the early evening light. Quieter, almost abandoned. Most of the windows were dark. "Are you sure about this?" his father asked as they approached the east entrance. Before Miguel could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows. "You came," Mr. Chen said, genuine surprise in his voice. His eyes shifted to Miguel's father. "This is my papa," Miguel explained quickly. "He wanted to meet you." The two men sized each other up. Miguel's father spoke first. "My son says you offered to teach him music. Why?" Mr. Chen didn't flinch under the direct question. "Because talent shouldn't be wasted, and your son has plenty." "You were a professional musician?" Miguel's father asked, still skeptical. Mr. Chen smiled slightly. "Long time ago, but some things you never forget." He held out his hand. "Robert Chen. I've been the maintenance supervisor here for 15 years. No criminal record if that's what you're worried about." Miguel's father relaxed slightly and shook Mr. Chen's hand. "Miguel speaks highly of you. Says you heard something special in his playing." "I did," Mr. Chen said simply. "Would you like to come in and see the practice room? You're welcome to stay for the lesson." And just like that, the door to a new chapter in Miguel's life swung open. The practice room was small but impressive to Miguel. Sound-dampening panels lined the walls, a baby grand piano stood in one corner, and music stands were neatly arranged against the wall. His father whistled softly. clearly as impressed as Miguel by the room that probably cost more than their apartment. "You really have access to this place?" Miguel's father asked, running his hand over the piano's polished surface. Mr. Chen shrugged. "Part of my job is to keep the practice rooms in working order. I check the pianos, fix the music stands, make sure everything's clean. No one pays attention to what time I do it." Miguel's father nodded slowly, some of his suspicion fading. "Well, I should let you get started. Miguel, I'll pick you up at 7:30. After his father left, Miguel stood awkwardly in the center of the room, unsure what to do. "Let's hear what you've got," Mr. Chen said, sitting on a chair and gesturing for Miguel to play. The whole piece this time without anyone interrupting. Miguel took a deep breath, positioned his guitar, and began to play the same piece he'd performed for Director Harrington. This time, without the pressure of judgmental eyes, his fingers moved more freely. When he finished, he looked up nervously. Mr. Chen was nodding, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Good, very good. Now I see what we're working with. You really think it's good?" Miguel asked, hardly daring to believe it. "The raw material is excellent. Now we need to shape it." Mr. Chen stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled out some sheet music and a notebook. "First lesson, you need to learn to read music." Miguel's heart sank. "That's going to take forever. No shortcuts in music, kid. But we'll focus on what you need." Mr. Chen sat down beside him. "By the way, what's your goal here? Just to prove that director wrong or something more?" Miguel thought about it. "I want to get good enough to join the orchestra. My parents can't afford regular music lessons, and the scholarship program would give me that chance." "Fair enough. The next auditions are in 3 months. We've got work to do." Mr. Chen opened the notebook. "Let's start with the basics. These are the notes on a staff. That first lesson flew by." Miguel's head was spinning with terms like quarter notes and time signatures, but he was also buzzing with excitement. This was real music education, something he'd dreamed about but never thought he'd get. As promised, his father returned at 7:30. Mr. Chen handed Miguel some photocopied sheets. "Practice these every day. See you Wednesday, same time." On the way home, Miguel couldn't stop talking about everything he'd learned. His father listened, a cautious smile on his face. "He seems to know what he's talking about," he admitted. "Just be careful, mijo. Don't get your hopes too high." But Miguel's hopes were already soaring. Over the next weeks, a routine developed. 3 times a week, Miguel would head to Westlake after dinner. Mr. Chen would be waiting at the east entrance, and for an hour, he'd teach Miguel everything from music theory to proper fingering techniques. "Your instincts are good," Mr. Chen told him during one lesson. "You naturally do things that take some students years to learn. But your foundation needs work." The lessons weren't easy. Mr. Chen was kind but demanding. He made Miguel repeat passages until his fingers ached, drilled him on scales until Miguel thought he'd go crazy, and assigned technical exercises that seemed impossible at first. "I can't do this," Miguel complained one evening, throwing down his pencil after struggling with a particularly difficult transcription exercise. "Can't or won't?" Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "It's too hard," Miguel insisted. Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. "You know what's hard? Working 2 jobs to put food on the table like your parents do. Learning a new language in a new country like your grandparents did." He tapped the music paper. This is just notes on a page. You can beat this." Properly chastised, Miguel picked up his pencil and tried again. At home, Miguel practiced until his fingers were raw. He'd wrap Band-Aids around the worst blisters and keep going. His younger sister Lucia would sometimes sit beside him, watching in fascination as he worked through the exercises Mr. Chen had assigned. "Does it hurt?" she asked once, pointing to his bandaged fingers. "A little," Miguel admitted, "but it's worth it." 1 month into their lessons, Mr. Chen introduced a new challenge. "You need to learn to blend your style with classical technique. Try playing this Bach piece, but incorporate some of your own rhythms." It was like trying to mix oil and water at first. The structured classical piece fought against Miguel's natural, more fluid style. But slowly, something new began to emerge. A sound that was neither purely classical nor purely folk, but something uniquely Miguel's. "Now we're getting somewhere," Mr. Chen said with a rare smile when Miguel finally managed to make it work. "This is what's going to set you apart." Not everything was going smoothly, though. Miguel's grades were slipping as he poured all his energy into music. His mother noticed first. "Your teacher called today. she said one evening as Miguel was rushing to finish dinner before heading to his lesson. She says you're falling behind in math. Miguel stared at his plate. I'll catch up. I just need more time to practice right now. His parents exchanged concerned looks. Music is important, his father said carefully, but school comes first, always. But Papa, this is my chance, Miguel argued. I only have 2 more months until the next auditions. And what happens if you fail again? His father asked. You need an education to fall back on. The words stung, but Miguel knew his father wasn't being cruel, just practical. Life had taught him to be cautious about dreams. I won't fail, Miguel promised. And I'll bring my grades up. I'll study more in between practices. True to his word, Miguel created a strict schedule for himself. He'd do homework immediately after school, practice guitar until dinner, then go to his lessons with Mr. Chen. Late at night, he'd practice more, playing as softly as possible so as not to disturb his family in their small apartment. The exhaustion began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. At school, he struggled to stay awake during classes. At home, he was irritable and short-tempered, very unlike his usual self. This isn't healthy, Miguel, his mother said one night, finding him asleep on the floor with his guitar still in his hands. You're pushing yourself too hard. I have to, Miguel mumbled sleepily as she helped him to bed. It's the only way. Even Mr. Chen noticed. You look like you haven't slept in days, he observed during their next lesson. That won't help your playing. Music needs rest too. But Miguel couldn't slow down. The audition date was approaching too quickly, and he still had so much to learn. 2 weeks before the audition, disaster struck. Miguel woke up with his right hand so swollen and painful he could barely move his fingers. He'd been ignoring the increasing pain for days, pushing through it with determination. Now his body was forcing him to stop. Tendinitis, the clinic doctor told him after a brief examination. You've overworked the tendons. You need to rest this hand completely for at least a week, preferably 2. Miguel felt his world crashing down around him. 2 weeks. But my audition is in 2 weeks. The doctor shook her head. If you don't rest it now, you could cause permanent damage. Then you'll never play again. That evening, Miguel broke down in tears as he told Mr. Chen about the diagnosis. All this work for nothing, he sobbed. I can't audition like this. Mr. Chen listened quietly, then said, Show me your left hand. Confused, Miguel held it up. That one's fine, right? Mr. Chen asked. Yes, but I can't play with just one hand. Can't you? Mr. Chen went to the piano and played a beautiful melody using only his left hand. Limitations force creativity. We'll work around this. For the next week, they focused on music theory, ear training, and left-hand exercises. Miguel couldn't practice at home, which was both frustrating and strangely liberating. He caught up on sleep and schoolwork and spent more time with his family. His grandmother, who lived with them, noticed the change in him. You seem lighter, she said in Spanish as they sat on the tiny balcony of their apartment one evening. Less burdened, Miguel sighed. I'm just worried about the audition. I've worked so hard and now this. He held up his bandaged right hand. His grandmother took his hands in hers, both strong despite her age, marked with the evidence of a lifetime of hard work. Life rarely goes as planned, Nieto. The test isn't whether you can avoid obstacles, but how you overcome them. She reached inside her blouse and pulled out a small pendant on a worn leather cord. This was your grandfather's. He played with legends back home, you know. Not because he was the most technically perfect musician, but because he played from here. She placed her hand over her heart. Miguel had heard the stories of his grandfather's musical adventures, but had never seen the pendant before. He wanted you to have this when the time was right, his grandmother continued. I think that time is now. She slipped the cord around Miguel's neck. The pendant was simple, a small wooden carving of a bird in flight. He said music should soar like a bird, free but purposeful, she explained. Your music has his spirit in it. I hear it when you play. That night, Miguel lay in bed looking at the pendant, thinking about his grandfather whom he'd never met, about Mr. Chen with his quiet wisdom, about his parents working multiple jobs to give their children opportunities they never had. He thought about Director Harrington's dismissive laugh and, for the first time, felt something other than shame when he remembered it. I'll prove her wrong, he whispered to himself. Not just for me, but for all of them. The next morning, Miguel woke up with a new determination. His hand was feeling better, not healed, but improved. There was still a week left before the audition. "I need to adapt my piece," he told Mr. Chen that evening. "Something I can play even with my hand not at full strength, but that still shows what I can do." Mr. Chen nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a real musician. Let's get to work." The flyer on the school bulletin board caught Miguel's eye as he walked to class. "Citywide Youth Music Competition," it read in bold letters. "Special guest judges from Juilliard School of Music. Grand prize includes summer workshop scholarship." Miguel stopped in his tracks, causing a student behind him to bump into his shoulder. "Watch it," the boy muttered, but Miguel barely noticed. His eyes scanned the details. The competition was in 2 weeks, the same time he'd planned to re-audition for Westlake's orchestra. But this was bigger, much bigger. "You should enter," said a voice beside him. His music teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, was watching him with a knowing smile. She was one of the few people at school who believed in his talent. Miguel shook his head. "I don't think I'm ready for something like this." "You won't know until you try," she replied, taking a copy of the flyer and pressing it into his hand. "Registration deadline is tomorrow. Think about it." All day Miguel couldn't get the competition out of his mind. Juilliard judges. That was the most prestigious music school in the country. They'd be even harder to impress than Director Harrington. That evening, as he headed to his lesson with Mr. Chen, Miguel's hand was still stiff, but much improved. The doctor had cleared him to play again, but cautioned him to take it easy. "Short practice sessions," she'd warned, "and stop immediately if there's pain." He showed the flyer to Mr. Chen as soon as he arrived. "Interesting timing," Mr. Chen said, studying it. "You think you're ready?" "No," Miguel admitted, "but Mrs. Alvarez thinks I should try." Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment, considering. "What does your gut tell you?" Miguel touched the wooden bird pendant that now hung around his neck. "That I'd be crazy to try, but also crazy not to." A slow smile spread across Mr. Chen's face. "Then I think we have our answer." He put the flyer down and picked up his own guitar, an old but beautiful instrument that he occasionally brought to their lessons. "Let's hear what you've been working on." Miguel played the adapted version of his piece, simpler in some ways than the original but more refined. He'd incorporated some of the classical techniques Mr. Chen had taught him, while maintaining the core of his own style. When he finished, he looked up anxiously. "What do you think? Could it work for the competition?" "It's good," Mr. Chen said, "but competition pieces need to showcase technical skill as well as creativity. Let me show you something." He positioned his fingers on the guitar and played a dazzling sequence of notes that made Miguel's jaw drop. "This is a classical variation that would fit perfectly in the middle section of your piece." "Think you can learn it in 2 weeks?" Miguel's eyes widened. "I can try." For the next 2 weeks, Miguel lived and breathed music. His hand was healing, but he had to be careful not to overdo it. Mr. Chen showed him proper warm-up techniques and ways to play that put less strain on his tendons. They worked tirelessly on integrating the classical section into Miguel's piece. It's like having 2 different songs fighting each other. Miguel complained after a particularly frustrating session. "They're not fighting," Mr. Chen corrected. "They're dancing. You just need to find the right steps." At home, his parents watched his renewed dedication with a mixture of pride and concern. "The competition is at Westlake Academy," Miguel told them over dinner one night. "The same place that rejected me." His father frowned. "Are you sure about this?" "What if that director is there?" "She probably will be," Miguel admitted. "She's on the competition committee." "All the more reason to show her what she missed," his grandmother said firmly, surprising everyone at the table. "My grandson plays with the heart of his ancestors. Let her hear it." The day before the competition, Miguel had his final lesson with Mr. Chen. They ran through the piece one last time, and for the first time, it flowed perfectly. The transition between Miguel's original style and the classical section was seamless, creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts. "That's it," Mr. Chen said, his eyes shining with pride. "That's the one." Miguel beamed, but then a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "What if it's not enough? These are judges from Juilliard." "Music isn't math," Mr. Chen replied. "There's no single right answer. All you can do is play your truth and let it speak for itself." That night, Miguel could hardly sleep. He kept running the piece through his head, imagining himself on stage, picturing the judges' reactions. Would they dismiss him like Director Harrington had? Or would they hear what Mr. Chen heard? The morning of the competition dawned bright and clear. Miguel dressed in his best clothes. A button-up shirt his mother had ironed the night before, his only pair of dress pants, slightly too short at the ankles now, and shoes polished to a shine. Around his neck, his grandfather's pendant rested against his chest. "You look handsome," his mother said, tears in her eyes as she straightened his collar. "Like a real musician." "He is a real musician," his grandmother corrected, adjusting the pendant so it sat properly. "Always has been." The whole family piled into their old car for the drive to Westlake Academy. Even his father had taken the morning off work, a rare occurrence that underscored the importance of the day. The school looked different today, bustling with activity. Parents and students streaming in from all directions. Signs pointed to the auditorium where the competition would be held. "Wow," Lucia whispered as they entered the grand space. Rows of seats faced a stage much larger than the practice room where Miguel had been learning. A gleaming grand piano dominated one side of the stage. "Competitors should check in at the registration table," announced a woman with a clipboard. Miguel squeezed his mother's hand, then made his way to the table. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Name?" asked the student volunteer at the table. "Miguel Reyes." "Guitar." The student checked a list. "You're number 23. Please take a seat in the competitors section. Your family can sit in the general audience area." Miguel looked back at his family. His father gave him a thumbs up. His mother blew a kiss, and his grandmother made a small gesture that he knew was a blessing. Lucia was bouncing with excitement. The competitors section was filled with students in formal attire, many from prestigious music schools around the city. They all seemed to know each other, chatting confidently about their pieces and teachers. Miguel sat alone, clutching his guitar case. A boy with a violin case sat down beside him. "First competition?" he asked, noticing Miguel's nervous expression. Miguel nodded. "Me too," the boy said, though his crisp suit and confident demeanor suggested otherwise. "I'm playing Paganini's Caprice number 24. You?" An original composition," Miguel said quietly. The boy's eyebrows shot up. "Bold choice. Most people stick to the classics for competitions like this. Good luck, though." Before Miguel could respond, the lights dimmed and a woman walked onto the stage, Director Harrington. Miguel sank lower in his seat. "Welcome to the 15th Annual Citywide Youth Music Competition," she announced. "We are honored to have with us today 3 distinguished judges from the Juilliard School of Music." She gestured to 3 serious-looking people sitting at a table to the side of the stage. The competition began. One by one, students went up to perform. The standard was incredibly high. Flawless Bach fugues, complex violin concertos, breathtaking piano solos. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause. Miguel felt his confidence draining with each perfect performance. What had he been thinking? These kids had been training their whole lives at the best music schools with the best teachers. He was just a boy who'd had a few weeks of real lessons. "Number 22, Philip Wong, piano," called Director Harrington. The boy next to Miguel stood up. "That's me after next," he whispered to Miguel. "Good luck," Miguel nodded numbly. He took out his guitar, checking the tuning for the 100th time that morning. His hands were sweating so much he was afraid they'd slip on the strings. From across the auditorium, he caught sight of a familiar figure standing at the back. Mr. Chen in his janitor's uniform, watching quietly. Their eyes met, and Mr. Chen gave him a small nod that somehow steadied Miguel's racing heart. Philip's performance was stunning, a technically flawless rendition that had the audience on their feet. Director Harrington was beaming as she announced, "Number 23, Miguel Reyes, guitar." The moment had arrived. Miguel stood on shaky legs and made his way to the stage. The lights were blinding, the audience a sea of indistinct faces. He could just make out his family in the middle section, and Mr. Chen still standing at the back. As he took his position on the chair provided, Miguel caught Director Harrington's eye. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by surprise and something that looked like amusement. She clearly remembered the boy whose music she'd dismissed. Miguel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the pendant against his chest. He thought of his grandfather playing in crowded venues back in Guatemala, of Mr. Chen in recording studios backing up famous musicians, of his grandmother's weathered hands guiding his own on guitar strings when he was little. He opened his eyes, positioned his fingers on the strings, and began to play. The first notes were hesitant, his fingers still a little stiff from the injury. But as the music flowed, Miguel felt himself relaxing into it. This was his language, his voice. The weeks of practice took over, and the piece began to build, his own unique rhythms blending seamlessly into the classical section Mr. Chen had taught him, then returning to the folk-inspired finale with new depth and complexity. Miguel was so absorbed in the music that he almost forgot where he was. The audience, the judges, Director Harrington, all faded away. It was just him and the guitar and the spirits of all those who had brought him to this moment. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then from the back of the room, a single person began to applaud. Others joined in, the applause growing until it filled the auditorium. Miguel looked up, dazed. The Juilliard judges were leaning together, talking animatedly. Director Harrington was staring at him with an unreadable expression. As Miguel stood to leave the stage, he caught sight of his family. His mother was wiping tears from her eyes. His father was clapping harder than anyone, and his grandmother was nodding with quiet pride. Lucia was bouncing up and down, pointing at him excitedly. That was different, said the next competitor as Miguel returned to his seat. In a good way. Miguel mumbled his thanks, still in a daze. Whatever happened next, whether he won or lost, he had played his music his way and people had listened. Really listened. As the final competitors performed, Miguel found himself thinking not about the results but about the journey, from that first devastating rejection to this moment. He'd learned more than music along the way. He'd learned about perseverance, about blending different worlds, about honoring his roots while embracing new techniques. And he'd learned that sometimes, the people who believe in you come from the most unexpected places. The remaining performances passed in a blur. Miguel sat quietly, his fingers still tingling from playing, the sound of applause echoing in his mind. Around him, other competitors whispered and compared notes, but Miguel was lost in his own thoughts. The judges will now deliberate, Director Harrington announced when the last performer had finished. Please join us for refreshments in the lobby while we await the results. The audience began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the performances they'd witnessed. Miguel made his way through the crowd, searching for his family. He found them near the entrance to the lobby, his sister jumping up and down when she spotted him. Miguel, you were amazing. Lucia threw her arms around him. Everyone was watching you. His mother hugged him next, her eyes still shining with tears. My son, she whispered. So beautiful. His father, not usually one for big displays of emotion, clapped him firmly on the shoulder. Proud of you, mijo. No matter what happens. His grandmother simply took his face between her hands and nodded, a gesture that spoke volumes. Thank you for coming, Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion. All of you. Did you see their faces? Lucia asked excitedly. The judges were smiling. And that mean lady who laughed at you before, she looked shocked. Lucia, their mother scolded gently. Be respectful. But it's true, Lucia insisted.
She couldn't believe how good Miguel was.
Before Miguel could respond, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Mr. Chen standing there, still in his work uniform but with an unmistakable pride in his eyes. You did it, kid, Mr. Chen said simply. You found the balance. Miguel's family looked curiously at the janitor. His father stepped forward, recognition dawning on his face. You're the music teacher. Mr. Chen smiled slightly. Just someone who knows a little about music. No, Miguel's father said firmly, extending his hand. You're the teacher who believed in my son when others didn't. Thank you. Mr. Chen seemed embarrassed by the gratitude but shook the offered hand. Your son has a gift. All I did was show him some techniques. Join us while we wait for the results, Miguel's mother suggested. Mr. Chen glanced around uncomfortably. Better not. Staff aren't supposed to mingle during events. He turned to Miguel. Whatever happens next, remember what you accomplished today. You played from the heart with skill and soul. That's rare. As Mr. Chen slipped away into the crowd, Miguel felt a tap on his other shoulder. He turned to find the boy who had sat next to him during the competition, Philip, the piano player. Hey, that was really different, Philip said. In a good way. Where do you study? Miguel hesitated. I've been taking private lessons. Seriously? That's it? Philip looked impressed. Well, you've got a shot at placing today. The judges were really into your piece. Before Miguel could process this unexpected encouragement, a bell rang, signaling that the judges had reached their decision. Everyone hurried back to the auditorium, excitement and tension filling the air. Miguel's family found their seats while he returned to the competitors section. His heart was pounding again, but differently this time. Not with fear, but with a strange sense of peace. He'd done his best. Whatever happened now, no one could take away what he'd accomplished. Director Harrington took the stage again, this time with an envelope in her hand. Before we announce the winners, the judges would like to commend all of our participants. The standard was exceptionally high this year. She opened the envelope with a flourish. In third place, with a beautiful rendition of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, Alexis Chen. A girl with a serious expression walked onto the stage to accept her certificate and a small trophy. In second place, performing Paganini's Caprice No. 24, Philip Wong. Philip nodded at Miguel as he passed, heading to the stage with confident steps. And our first place winner, who will receive a full scholarship to the Juilliard Summer Youth Workshop. Miguel held his breath. Around him, the remaining competitors leaned forward in their seats, performing an original composition that beautifully bridged classical technique with cultural heritage. Miguel Reyes. For a moment, Miguel was frozen in shock. Had he heard correctly? The competitors around him were clapping, some nudging him to stand up. His legs felt like jelly as he made his way to the stage. Director Harrington's smile seemed forced as she handed him a large trophy in an envelope. One of the Juilliard judges, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, stepped forward to shake his hand. "That was extraordinary, young man," she said warmly. "We'd love to see you at the workshop this summer." Miguel could barely form words. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Thank you so much." As he turned to leave the stage, clutching his trophy and envelope, he caught sight of Mr. Chen standing at the back of the auditorium. The janitor gave him a small salute, his face glowing with pride. Miguel's family was waiting for him at the edge of the stage, his mother openly crying now, his father looking stunned but delighted. Lucia was dancing in circles, chanting, "My brother won! My brother won!" The next hour was a whirlwind of congratulations, photos, and conversations with the judges. The Juilliard representatives talked about his innovative approach and unique voice in music. Several parents asked which prestigious music school he attended, their faces showing surprise when he explained he was mostly self-taught until recently. As the crowd began to thin, Miguel noticed Director Harrington watching him from across the room. After a moment's hesitation, he excused himself from his family and walked over to her. "Mrs. Harrington," he said politely, unsure what else to say. She studied him with an unreadable expression. "That was quite a different performance from your audition, Mr. Reyes." Miguel nodded. "I've been working hard." Clearly. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You've developed remarkably in a short time. May I ask who has been teaching you?" Miguel glanced toward where Mr. Chen was discreetly cleaning up some programs left on seats. "Someone who believed in me." Director Harrington followed his gaze, her eyebrows rising slightly when she realized he was looking at the janitor. "Robert Chen, our maintenance supervisor? He knows a lot about music," Miguel said simply. A complex expression crossed the director's face. Surprise, then something like embarrassment, and finally, a grudging respect. "Well, it seems I may have been hasty in my assessment of your potential." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a card. "The scholarship to Juilliard's summer program is well-deserved, but you'll need consistent training throughout the year. Westlake Academy would like to offer you a place in our scholarship program for the fall semester." Miguel stared at the card in disbelief. This was what he'd wanted from the beginning: access to proper music education, a chance to develop his skills fully. But now it felt different. Not like a desperate need, but like a choice he could make. "Thank you," he said, taking the card. "I'll think about it." Something like surprise flickered across Director Harrington's face. She clearly wasn't used to her offers being met with anything less than immediate gratitude. "Yes, well, the deadline is on the card. We have limited spots." As she walked away, Miguel felt a lightness in his chest. 3 months ago, her dismissal had crushed him. Now her approval, while nice, didn't define him. He rejoined his family, who were waiting by the door. What did she want? His father asked. Miguel showed them the card. She offered me a scholarship for the fall. His mother gasped. Miguel, that's wonderful. Yes, he agreed. But I want to talk about it first. As a family. He looked around at the faces of the people who had supported him through everything. And I want to make sure Mr. Chen can keep teaching me whatever I decide. His grandmother patted his cheek. Wise boy. Success is sweetest when shared with those who believed in you from the start. As they walked out of the auditorium, Miguel spotted Mr. Chen emptying a trash can near the exit. Their eyes met and Miguel held up his trophy with a grin. Mr. Chen winked. Outside, the spring sun was shining brightly. Miguel's father suggested they go for ice cream to celebrate, a rare treat in their household. As they walked to the car, Miguel found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him here. From the crushing disappointment of his first audition to the triumph of today, he had learned more than just music. He'd learned about perseverance, about finding mentors in unexpected places, about blending different parts of himself into something new. Most importantly, he'd learned that the words, "You call that music?" weren't the end of his story, but the beginning. 6 months later, Miguel stood in the center of Westlake Academy's main performance hall. Around him, the youth orchestra was setting up for their fall concert. Miguel adjusted his bow tie, still not used to the formal uniform, and carefully positioned his guitar. Director Harrington tapped her baton on the stand. From the top, everyone. And remember, this piece was specially commissioned to showcase our newest scholarship student. Miguel smiled as he began to play the opening notes of his composition, now fully orchestrated, with strings and woodwinds joining in where once he had played alone. Mr. Chen had helped him with the arrangements during their continuing weekly lessons, which had been his one condition for accepting Westlake's scholarship. In the audience, his family would be watching proudly. His mother had taken the day off work for this. His father had made sure to trade shifts so he could attend. Lucia had talked of nothing else for days, and his grandmother had polished the wooden bird pendant that still hung around Miguel's neck. As the music swelled around him, his music, recognized now as real and valuable, Miguel thought about all the other kids like him, with talents waiting to be discovered. The outreach program he'd helped start at Westlake was already bringing in students from neighborhoods like his, kids who might otherwise never have access to music education. The door that had once been slammed in his face was now open, not just for him but for others. And as the orchestra played his creation, the perfect blend of classical training and cultural heritage, Miguel knew that this was just the beginning of what his music could do. Sometimes, when someone laughs and says, "You call that music?" the best answer isn't words but a melody that changes hearts and opens doors, and Miguel's melody was just getting started.